Come on in, folks. Come on, no problem. Again, I'm Jonathan McCoy. I'm the Vice President of the MLK Association, and I'd like to again welcome you. We are working in conjunction with the city of Asheville. They asked us to, for we could work together in doing a week-long of events in Juneteenth that are really highlighting what community is all about, how community is intertwined. The people that live in this community are connected. And understanding that connection, how can we and why should we work to make sure those connections are strong, therefore making sure our community is strong. And one way you're going to have strength is understanding your past. And so today's Lunch and Learn is based on gentrification. Also based not only on gentrification, but also understanding what were some of the African-American communities that were in Asheville, that are still in Asheville, but also those that were in Asheville, where did they go? What happened? And understanding that will help us shape where we go in the future. And that's important because, again, one thing having these community centers, as you see, there's always children around. Well, if children are in the future, how are we as adults helping establish the future that they're going to enjoy and live in? So thinking of that and looking at themes, especially looking at the Department of Transportation's project that we know about as they get ready to do that new extension on the highway, trying to deal with how we travel the Bowen Bridge and looking at places that already know that they're going to have to relocate. We know that Savage Station is already looking to move. The Jackson Western Ware has already said they're moving. So they know because of that project, they both have to relocate. So we know if businesses are relocating, we also have to be aware that it's going to affect communities, houses. And that's what we're looking at. So that also helps us spotlight that issue of gentrification. Because when you think about it, throughout our history in America, Black neighborhoods are really the constant victim of urban renewal. New houses or new buildings and new businesses change the economic footprint of neighborhoods. And they usually do put those new buildings or those new means out of the reach of those who live in those neighborhoods. Puts it beyond their ability for those citizens to enjoy this revitalization of their neighborhood. So they end up losing their neighborhood because they end up having to leave their neighborhoods. Because if it's not new buildings or new businesses that are coming in, it's new roads, new street or a wider street. And that forces community members to move. So those are things that we have to understand as we talk about this, because a lot of times when you have that shift, when you have that move, be it with the buildings, be it with the streets, also a lot of times there comes not only that movement of people that disrespects them, but even those new places, some of the names of those places is disrespecting to those neighborhoods. Look at it in the history here in Asheville and Buncombe County. Well, Edward Buncombe, which Buncombe County is named after, was a slave owner. Samuel Ash, who Asheville's named after, was a slave owner. James Washington Patton, Patton Avenue is named after, slave owner. Augustus Merriman, Merriman Avenue, slave owner. Leonard Henderson, Hendersonville Road and the town of Hendersonville, slave owner. Nicholas Woodfin, Woodfin Road and the town of Woodfin, slave owner. Michael and Jane Weaver, Weaverville Road and the town of Weaverville, where I live, slave owner. So when you look at that, again, when you think about this changing of the landscape, but those names, what happens? And again, as you build these places, what places might be lost? Be it a stump town, be it a relocation of Shiloh. It wasn't, that community moved, got moved. You know, East End. All these places have different locations, different names, and a difference of where or how they were first originally created. And so that sets the stage for what we're enjoying today. First thing that we have today is a play. So one thing, as they told me, as this play, you need to think about it. Well, most of us can remember, even I can remember, how we used to listen to the radio. Radio is where we got our entertainment. The Shadow came on. I used to try riding with my parents going up to visit people, and our folks up in Philadelphia, and we would have the radio on, and it'd be late. My dad liked to drive late at night or early in the morning, and we would listen to NPR, and they would start doing those shows in the Shadow. Well, you close your eyes and you listen so you can imagine what the acting was all about. And so that's what this play is. The play is called The Road and was written by Andrea Clark. It's directed by Debra Austin, and members of the cast are Patrick Covington, Sekou Coleman, and Oralene Simmons. They'll be our actors for this play, and as they perform, again, close your eyes and listen so that the images come forward. And then following the play, we'll have a discussion and a presentation from Anita White, who will talk about Shiloh. And we have Sophie Dixon, who will talk about Stumptown. What were those communities? Where are those communities? What happened? And if they are not here as we remember them, what took their place? But all those things talking about, again, this discussion of the history of African-American neighborhoods in Asheville and how gentrification has diminished their presence is what this Lunch and Learn is all about. So now I ask the members of The Road production to come for that.
A Reader's Theater presentation of The Road, a one-act play by Andrea Clark. It's a hot day in the summer of 1974 in the East End of a small town in the mountains of western North Carolina. Minna Miller, in her rocker, reads the newspaper on the front porch of the wooden frame house her father left her decades ago. Arden Fitzgerald enters from the house with a glass of ginger ale he hands to Minna, his ancient cousin. He sits down in his rocker.
Don't let them bubbles scratch your throat.
How would they do that, Arden?
These soda pops they're making have more bubbles than liquid. I found that out. That's the reason your water is the way it is today.
Is that it?
Naturally. In the old days, everybody got their water from a well.
Like the one Papa built over yonder.
Yes, indeed. But those industries ruin water supply. All your bottling companies and breweries in New York and Boston. Reason I don't drink no beer is that mountain is the only safe liquor. Mountain folks got the only pure water left in the country.
Puts me in mind when Papa dug that well. Mama told him, Tom, you best send for the water seeker to tell you where to dig. Oh no, Papa said. I don't believe in that. Papa was a Catholic.
Yes, indeed.
Papa dug and he dug. Had a whole gang of Negroes digging. And still didn't find no water. One day Mama said, Tom, I sent for the water seeker. He came, old Sager from Bowcatcher Mountain, cut himself a willow fork and held it in his hand. The stick commenced to jump. Dig here, he said, and Papa gave him $2.
Them people knew what they were doing. You take your lumber mills. They ruin the country cutting down all that timber.
Why they do that, Arden?
I've seen many a paper mill up north with piles of trees being turned into pulp. Smells like rotten eggs. Up in Vermont and Hoosick Falls, never did care much for paper after that.
Is that so?
They cook the wood like you cook Irish potatoes. Then they mash it and roll it out like a pie crust. When it dries, they cut sheets of paper out of it.
This evening's paper said they're starting on the road.
Yeah, let me tell you the reason for that. A bunch of crooked politicians.
I think we should call Mr. Whaley.
Them lawyers is the worst. I found that out.
He knows what's best for us to do.
No need to call them. They ain't building no road. And besides that, it ain't even coming this way. It's going across Flint Street. I found that out. Went up to the city hall and the mayor showed me the map. The highway ain't coming nowhere near here, Minna.
But it says in the paper they're starting work on it today.
Newspapers ain't nothing, just lies. Why, when I was driving for Father Fahey up in Boston, we drove by the office of the Globe. That's the biggest newspaper in the North, Minna. Father Fahey says to me, "See that newspaper, Arden? It ain't worth the paper it's printed on."
This ain't Boston. I'm worried they're gonna take the house.
They ain't taking nothing. And if they do, they got to pay you. That's the law, Minna.
I thought you said they weren't taking it.
They ain't. But if they did, we get 50 to 100,000 for this property. And then we could build a bungalow across the street.
Papa built this house.
Yes, indeed.
He built it for Mama, but he left it to me. Leave it to Minna, he said. Minna can fix anything.
Speaking of fixing, that reminds me of
And
that.
now they want to take it.
Yes, indeed.
I'm too old to build.
Yes, indeed.
I'll soon be gone. But I worry about you, Arden. What will you do?
The reason they're always building roads is because of the automobile industry in Detroit.
Is that it?
Naturally, they're making cars with wide tires.
Is that so?
Them big new tires take up more room on the road.
Do?
The best tires in the market come from Sears and Roebuck. I wouldn't drive nothing else. Dependable and stop on a dime.
Is that right?
One time I was driving to Cincinnati and I had a flat.
The
I jumped out and
time I went to
well,
Cincinnati.
I was working for the Cardinal then. He said, "Arden, I believe we have a flat." So I just jumped out and then I started to...
I got lost. I went to visit my sister and I took a trolley ride in town. I got off the trolley and what do you think I saw?
What did you say, Minna?
What do you think I saw?
What?
A monkey dressed in a suit. He belonged to an organ grinder, and one would play and the other would dance. I followed that monkey all over Cincinnati.
I told Father Fahey the flat wasn't nothing. Anybody could fix a flat.
A policeman put me on the trolley home. My sister was worried to death.
You know, Minna, I never did ride a horse and wagon. Never cared for horses.
Following the monkey. Following the monkey.
Bruce Aware enters from the street, walks through the yard, and stands on the front porch steps. A young ecology activist, he is dressed in jeans and a t-shirt and wears his long hair pulled back in a ponytail. He carries a clipboard.
Afternoon, folks. How y'all doing?
Howdy ho, howdy do.
Folks, my name is Bruce Aware, and I'm chairman of the Committee to Save the Dogwoods.
Aware. Isn't your people the owner of the department store?
Yes, ma'am.
I buy my stockings from you. There's no other store carries cotton stockings anymore, and I do love them.
Yes, ma'am, that's fine. I guess you folks haven't heard about the committee.
We already gave to the Heart Fund.
Oh, we're not connected with the Heart Fund, sir. Perhaps you didn't know that when they start work on the highway today, They're going to destroy every one of the beautiful dogwoods that line this street.
Them old dogwoods ain't much good now, all rotted out.
Aren't they lovely? I planted 2 of them myself, and I'm 91.
That's wonderful, ma'am. Our committee wants to save them from destruction.
They nailed Jesus to the dogwood. That's why the blossoms are red.
Yes, ma'am. Could I ask you folks to sign this petition? We'll stop this slaughter of nature if we have to lie in the paths of the bulldozers.
I'm proud of those dogwoods every spring.
How about you, sir?
I ain't signing nothing.
But, sir, it's your duty as a citizen.
Let me tell you the reason for that. Ever been to Schenectady, New York? Prettiest little town you'd ever want to see. Had a train station, tore it down.
Sir, I fail to see how this
Yes,
has any...
indeed, and let me tell you something else. The reason they're making them big tires is that the highways is too wide for the old ones.
Maybe he knows something about the road, Arden.
Oh, shut up, Minna. He don't know nothing.
Say, aren't you folks supposed to be moved out of here?
Shut up. Get out of here. Get out of here before I call the police.
Take it easy, mister. I'm leaving. Take it easy.
Bruce backs up and exits quickly up the street.
What did he want, Arden?
Them hippies don't know nothing. Hippies are ruining the country, along with the Mexicans. They don't pay no taxes.
Yes, indeed. Following the monkey.
Talk about dogwood trees. They ain't good for nothing. In the tree line, nothing beats pine.
Pine?
That's right, pine. Use it for anything. You can't build with dogwood.
They are pretty. Did he say the city's cutting them down?
He didn't say nothing. Out to make trouble.
Aware. They own the department store.
It's time for your nap, Minna.
It ain't up to me. The Lord gives and the Lord takes. It's all his.
Yes, indeed.
You don't think he'll be coming back, do you?
Who?
That Aware boy.
Speaking of trees, the biggest one I ever saw was on the Boston Common. They put lights on it every Christmas.
Will you lock the door, Arden?
I'll lock it.
They exit into the house. As the lights fade, we hear the sounds of bulldozers and splintering wood.
Okay, I guess I'll kind of start. My name is Anita White-Carter. I've lived in Shiloh. Well, I grew up in Shiloh, and I'm just sort of lately been interested in the history of Shiloh. And the history of Shiloh is my lane. The current events in Shiloh belong to Sophie Dixon. Sophie is the president of Shiloh Community Association. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, or maybe we should start with Stumptown, and then it would flow better. So Sophie's going to tell you a little bit about Stumptown, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the history of Shiloh, and then Sophie's going to tag team me and talk about what's going on in terms of current events and issues related to gentrification and that sort of thing.
Thank you. I'm sort of off balance here. I've got two things, and I was thinking I was doing one. But I could talk about Stumptown because I was born and raised in Stumptown. And I'll be 87 next month. So, you know, that's been a long time ago.
And still going strong.
So just to give you a little bit of history on me, I was born and raised in Stumptown. My mother was Vivian Wilson Ware. I was Ware. My father was Clayton Ware Sr. He passed when I was 8 years old. He worked for J.A. Baker Packing Company down on the river, and he worked there as a butcher. They were located on the river, and that, you know what that was about. At that time, they weren't thinking about the environment, and so that what they did was, what they didn't keep to sell, they got tossed in the river. And out of that, my father became an entrepreneur, because what he would do is, that's when we started don't realize that some of those things, they're delicacy now, so you have to pay big money for them. But during that time, he would take them and he'd package them up, take orders on his way to his work. And we lived in Stumptown, go down Hill Street to the river. And while he was going down Hill Street, he'd take his orders. And then when he got to work, the stuff they were going to throw away, whatever somebody ordered, he'd package that up. And then he'd bring it on up and give it to him and take his pay and come on home and have a pocket full of money. So during that time, my mother did not work because, he was doing 2 jobs. And he passed when I was 8. And so my mother went to work, and that's when it sort of spiraled out of control for us. Because at that time there weren't jobs except for being the maids from Stumptown up into the Montford area. So she was able to get a couple of jobs up there, and that's where she worked. But we didn't lack for anything. We managed, and we got through the whole thing. So I wanted to share that, because I wanted to also let you know that Stumptown was a real community, and that's what we lost. The living status, because I was born and raised in a little apartment, 4 Morrow Street, right off of Cortland Avenue, which was all white community, and most of us had like 3 rooms, and so in that 3 rooms there was my father, my mother, and 4 children. So you can imagine trying to manage it. But you know what? It was okay, because we understood that at that time, and so those apartments are all gone now. All of that has been torn down and moved out. And with that, it's destroyed basically the community. So I don't know how many people here might be familiar with Stumptown, but when you go over there now, even the apartment where we were on Cortland has been torn down. All of the apartments have been torn down, and I think there are two or three streets left. Gray Street, I think some of you know that street, and maybe a few others. But the whole community is gone, and that's what I'm trying to get to. That's what happens. I mean, it's nothing to stop it, and so a few people are still there trying to maintain and keep up with what we call Stumptown. And I'll stop. I was going to share some thoughts that we from this. We had one last reunion there in 2001, and if anybody wants to look at this before you leave, I'd like for you to see that. It was done by one of the people who were still there in Stumptown at the time, and so she gathered thoughts of all the people who used to be part of Stumptown, and I'll keep this forever as long as I'm around. But it has the memories of all the people who really were contacted and wanted to give their thoughts about what it was like to live in Stumptown. And I just got sad over the weekend reading this when I thought about these. They're no longer here, most of them, but they remember Stumptown. Thank you.
I don't remember Stumptown, but I have heard about it as it was like a village. It was a community, a real community for African American folk. But I grew up in Shiloh, and so Shiloh was not really affected by urban renewal, and it is still a continuously maybe African American neighborhood, but historically it is a continuing neighborhood, and in terms of intrusion into the neighborhood, the biggest thing we saw was in the late 1950s when I-40 came through, and it sort of split off one part of what we always thought of as Shiloh. But in terms of being an intact community, it still is. But I'll give you a little bit about the history of Shiloh. Shiloh was originally founded by freedmen at the end of the Civil War on land that is now present-day Biltmore Estate. when Vanderbilt decided to build his mountain home, he bought up thousands of acres, which included not only the little community of Shiloh, which we now refer to as Old Shiloh, but a lot of other small communities. And the center of that community was the Shiloh AME Zion Church, which was started in 1871. It's one of the oldest African-American Episcopal Zion churches in the area. And so he wanted that community along with many others. And so he sent his agent in to negotiate the sale. And there were conditions on the sale. The condition was, before the residents agreed to sell, the condition was that they would move the church or rebuild a church in the new location, which we now call New Shiloh, which is our current location. And get this, dig up the graves in the cemetery, move the cemetery, and reinter those graves in the new location. And the Reverend Billy Logan was one of the major people to help with the move and to move the church. And he oversaw the movement of the grave and the rebuilding of the church. And I shudder to think what that was like to move those graves and move them. And we still are not sure that they got all of them. But I was at the Biltmore Estate. They used to have something called the Legacy Tour. And on the Legacy Tour, you could go around and you can actually see where the old church was, and you can actually see some indentations of where the graves were moved. But now, in our current Shiloh, those graves are, for the most part, unmarked at the corner of Shiloh and Brooklyn Road. But the church was the center and the heart of the old Shiloh community. And when it was moved to New Shiloh, it was again the heart of the community. And it was not only a place of worship, but it was the school for a number of, for the first schools until 1928, when the members of the community gathered together, really did a push to get a new school, because the county was not, remember, you keep in context, I'm talking about the early 1900s, and the county was not that interested in educating Black kids. So the members of the neighborhood got together and lobbied for a Rosenwald school. How many of you know what a Rosenwald school is? Some of you do. To have a Rosenwald school in your community was just a crowning victory. And it was, the folk would raise money to match a grant from the Rosenwald Fund, and that was founded by Julius Rosenwald and Booker T. Washington. They built over 5,000 schools across the South for Black kids. And the thing about it was, you had to raise money to match that fund. And that gave the people of the community a sense of ownership for the school. So the school was the heart of the community. And Shiloh, in the early years, was a self-sustaining community. Remember, we're talking, this was a segregated community. They had their own businesses, a lot of mom and pop shops, a lot of activities centered around the school. But once they moved over in 1889, the community grew, and it grew based on the churches and the schools and the people. And it was a really, really robust community, and the school as the heart of the community. And the school was strongly supported by the people in the community. I remember my mother canning stuff so that in the fall, they would have stuff for soup. And I remember as a kid, we had really good meals. It was a nice school. And I'll never forget, we had a woman in the neighborhood who would make these gorgeous yeast rolls and bring them to the kids. And so we had, because the county gave us meager fare in terms of food for the cafeteria. Our books were secondhand books, but we had fabulous, so when I say secondhand books, when the white school got new books, we were given the old books. But I remember we had some fabulous teachers, some really good teachers. Black teachers at that time many of them had higher degrees, because in the summer, they would go up north to Columbia and some of those other places to get their master's degrees. And the state of North Carolina, of course, did not include African American history in its standard curriculum. But these teachers would bring in The Crisis, all kinds of books. I think we learned more about Black history in that Black school than the kids do now. And so we had a reunion, and all the kids came back and talked about some of the memories of the school. And for the most part, they were very happy with it. As I said, Shiloh was a community of strong working folk. We had not only the domestic workers, because Vanderbilt was smart when the community moved over. He had a workforce right across Hendersonville Road. We had a lot of people who worked at the Biltmore Estate and who worked in the Biltmore Forest, but we also had a number of doctors, lawyers, because remember, we're talking about a segregated community, so they had nowhere else to live. And so the kids had a lot of different kinds of role models during that time. There was a group in the Shiloh called the Community League, a prominent group of people who were interested in the growth of the community, civic-minded. These people organized and lobbied for paved streets, because at that time, it was a rural community with dirt roads and farms. And they also sponsored scouting troops, baseball teams. There was a golf course, a blacksmith. It was a true village, self-sustaining community. And when integration came, things sort of started to change. People had more places to go, more opportunities in terms of jobs. And of course, they closed the school. And that just sort of, that did something to the community when that school closed. And the kids were bused to other white schools in the county. I was going through the newspapers, and there was a lot of pushback for closing that school. But of course, we didn't win. They didn't win that argument. And in 1979, the school, the original Rosenwald School, was demolished, and it's now part of the community center. It's the Linwood Crump Community Center. Let's see. I mentioned that, and then in 2005, was it 2000? No, 2000, when the Community League, the Community League had built a little, I don't know, they had a lot of activities. They had a little building where they sold food and that sort, and they bought property to do that. And in 2005, the last remaining, what was he? Lawrence Wilson was the last remaining trustee of the Community League. He donated that property to the Shiloh Community Association, and they now have a garden. We have a community garden on that property. So Shiloh kind of, it grew, and it was, I loved living in Shiloh. I lived away from here for about 15 years, but I moved back so my son could grow up in this sort of village-type community. And I always felt very loved in that community, very safe in that community, and it was like a true, true village. And in recent years, the community has won a number of awards from the Community of Promise of the Western North Carolina Honors Awards for the work that it's doing in terms of revitalization. And the Shiloh Community Association has been instrumental, very instrumental, in keeping the neighborhood together, trying to keep it intact. And we owe that to the leadership of Sophie and those that came before her. So that's pretty much a summary. I don't want to talk too long because I could talk about Shiloh for hours. But that's pretty much a summary of what it was like. And like I said, it's still a thriving community. So we were not interfered with in terms of urban renewal, but we now are looking at trying to stem gentrification in the community. So I'm going to quit talking and let Sophie talk to you more about what's going on in the community now. And if you have any questions, we'll entertain them once she finishes.
Thank you, Anita. What she's telling you that I'm really not from Shiloh. I actually moved there. I've been living in my house for 54 years, but I'm still not from Shiloh. I wasn't born there.
No. Oh,
No.
wait a minute. Before she goes any further, I have to say this. I told you about the history of the church. In 2022, it was placed on the National Registry of Historic Places. Now you.
Thank you. And thank you. We tend to get overwhelmed when we have to talk about Shiloh, but I'm going to have something here that you can take with you, and I don't know if we have enough for everyone. With all the folk who are from Shiloh, but even if you've just been there a few months, please stand and let us see what kind of support we get from our community. Please stand. So when they heard we were coming, we knew we would have some of our folk with us. But we're going to pass these out, and Shaniqua, please make sure that, because I think we can give our folks one later if we need to. But we want to make sure that you have a takeaway, because we want you to have something that actually tells you the story of what's happening now in Shiloh. So what I'll do is, as she's passing that out, and you're starting to look at it, you'll see some of what's happening in Shiloh currently. What you're getting, we were featured in the Urban News at the end of the year, where we had been part of what was called the E.W. Pearson Collaborative. And that came about because we were working with what's now known as our legacy neighborhoods. We had East End, South Side, Burton Street, and Shiloh. Am I leaving anybody out? And so all of us came together, and in order for us to benefit from funding that was being made available by Buncombe County under the Isaac Coleman grant, we came together as a group. And Shiloh was already in a position where we were 501c3, and we were organized and incorporated. And so the county agreed that all of the communities could come together to participate in this grant. And Shiloh then became the physical agent. So here we were, but it worked. And so it worked so well, the first round of funding, 2 years, that when they looked at petitions for funding the next round, they looked out and saw what was going on with E.W. Pearson. So they gave us another 2 years. And that worked so well that when we put in for it again, we didn't have a clue that we would get more money, but they gave us more money. So for 6 years, we were getting funded by the county, and Shiloh was serving as a physical agent those 6 years and working with the other legacy neighborhoods. Now, the good part of that came out that those communities, and I'm so proud, and I think some of them are here today, they now have their 501c3s, and they are now incorporated, and they're standing on their own, and they're doing well. Let's give them a hand. But we know that this is what happens when we work together. And I think some of those folk are here. Sekou, thank you. He's currently serving as the leader for the Legacy Neighborhood Group. You've got this paper in front of you now, and what I'll do, instead of doing a lot of talking, I'll ask you to take that with you. And what the gig's going to give you is It has the calendar for Shiloh events for the rest of the year. I started out giving you the events starting in January. We celebrated 23 years of the association, Shiloh Community Association, in December. So that picture is in there. It also features, we have a wonderful scholarship program, and this is our scholarship chairperson. So every year we give away at least $1,000 to some young person in our community that's going to college. So these are just some of the things that we're doing in Shiloh, and we are just so grateful. What's currently happening, to cut this short, I think most of you may not know, and some know, that we were given a huge grant of funding from Dogwood Health Trust. And so that ended up being a $500,000 grant. So this press release came out finally, and I'll just read it and I'll capture what I'm trying to say. It said the Historic Shiloh Community Association is partnering with Dogwood Health Trust and WNC Briggs Foundation, who's our physical agent, to support the Shiloh community, a historically African-American neighborhood currently undergoing high levels of gentrification and displacement. In their effort to revitalize and preserve their neighborhood through community-led initiatives, the $500,000 investment will be used to hire a culturally responsive neighborhood navigator and ultimately support the creation of a community-based strategy addressing housing and the neighborhood revitalization. And I'll ask that person to stand, Shaniqua. She's her position is being funded through this grant, and she's being called the Shiloh Navigator. All right, she corrects me. So with those funds, we will continue the work of developing and preservation of the Shiloh community. Traditional and non-traditional funding opportunities like this promise to bolster our sustainability as an organization. We are thankful and enthusiastic for this invaluable investment. I didn't realize that was what I said, but that's what I said. Okay. And Shaniqua, as I mentioned, was hired to serve in this position, and she has just jumped in to hit the ground running. She is doing a wonderful job of going through our community and doing a survey and interviewing neighborhood that we're going to find out, who's in Shiloh, what are the needs are. We don't know what we'll be able to do with us. It sounds like a whole lot of money, and it is. But when you start looking at the needs, when they're home needs, like home repair possibly, or the person still they are living on Social Security. Like I said, I've been in my house for 54 years, and some have been there longer than me. And so they are trying to stay there. And so we want to make sure that we do what we can to help provide support for that. So that's one of the things we'll be looking at. Of course, we know homeowners insurance, the whole works. And when they can't stay there, guess what happens? They lose the house. And we want to make sure that we do what we can based on when we find out who's there and what those needs are, how we can help them to provide it. We're even looking at, I think Shanique was putting something together about wills and so forth. So, I mean, we're looking at this broad-based support for our community. And then when we get through putting this together, we hope that it will encourage some of our folk who left because they couldn't afford to stay in Shiloh or didn't want to stay, will come back now and help to repopulate Shiloh. And so I think we have some of our officers. Norma Baines is here. Norma, will you stand? She serves as our liaison. And these are elected positions. And I think I saw Benny Norman, and she's our financial secretary. And then, thank you, Benny. And then I think our treasurer is out somewhere trying to raise money. So, but everything's going really well. And so if you just kind of stay tuned, you'll be hearing other good things coming out about Shiloh. I didn't bring enough of this press release, but hopefully you heard some of it when it was announced. And so we are really excited, and everything is just going great. And we want you to continue to see great things coming out of the and out of Shiloh. And our one final thing, Shaniqua's grandfather was president of the Shiloh Community Association before I was. And Shaniqua was born and she was raised right there in Shiloh on Shiloh Road in her grandfather's home. And he passed. And so after he passed and they were without a president for a period of time, and I was just kind of getting involved because I had kids and a whole lot of stuff going on. And so they said, well, can you take it so we find somebody? And so how long has it been now, Norma? About 12 or 13 years later. I guess they're looking for somebody because I'm still president. But I'm proud. I'm proud to serve this position, and just want to tell you that Shiloh is just really a great community, and we have all kinds of things going on. So the other thing that this little piece of paper, and please keep it with you because it will tell you some ways that you can get involved with Shiloh. And also we have a community garden and we have a pavilion there that's available for some folk who come out now and use it for spaces like birthdays and other things. And then we have a tour of Shiloh. It's a Shine on Shiloh tour. And so if you come out to the garden on Saturday, any Saturday, or let them know ahead of time, they'll give you a tour of Shiloh and the historic sites. So we're just doing great things, and I could tell a lot more, but come out and see us. Thank you.
I just want to add one thing. This grant that we've gotten is to help to revitalize our neighborhood. And so when you think in terms of gentrification, that's different from revitalization. And so we're interested in revitalizing our neighborhood, and hopefully by doing so, use that as sort of a stem against gentrification. Because when a neighborhood is gentrified, so many of the people who live there lose out. And so there's a difference between a revitalized neighborhood and a gentrified neighborhood. And as I said before, I think the Community Association is doing a fantastic job of trying to revitalize the neighborhood and sort of stem back. Because she didn't tell you about our development plan, which she didn't. No, I'm not going to tell you. In what was it, 2010? Yeah, the 2010. Yeah, the neighborhood people met with people from the city to develop a neighborhood development plan. It's called the 2025 plan. Yeah. And here we are almost on 2025. And in that plan, the plan was adopted by the city. So there are certain rules and regulations about what can be built in Shiloh, what the neighborhood association has input into the development of Shiloh. And it was designed to try to keep the neighborhood intact as a residential neighborhood. And the Community Association has been dead on it. When a developer comes in there and they want to put up something, no, they got to go through Sophie.
Yeah, and we're also in the process of one day, and we thank the city for letting us use the Shiloh Linwood Crump Center, but we were working on having our own resource center. That's our next goal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any questions?
Will you mention the project with UNCA with our old Shiloh website that'll be available?
Oh, yes. The University of North Carolina history students, that project, yeah. Those students have been doing a lot of work in Shiloh, and I don't have any of the little QR codes. And so they have done a lot of research on Old Shiloh. They've worked with us in terms of helping to get it on the church on the historic register. They recently, the church did not have the church burned down in the mid-20s, so we lost a lot of records. So they've also worked with surveying the graveyard and trying to get a record of who is buried where. And if you want to know, and I don't have it with me, if you want to know more about it, if you look at, I don't know, there's a website, it's the 828 Archives Rep. If you just Google 828 Archives, is there anyone here who knows that better than me? Okay, you'll come up with the story of Old Shiloh, and there'll be links to families in Shiloh. As the kids worked in the graveyard, they would notice that there were a lot of whites in the neighborhood, in the graveyard. There were a lot of these people in the neighborhood. So they put up websites about these families. There's one up about the white family. My great-great-grandfather was one of the originals. Both of my great-great-grandfathers were some of the original founders in the neighborhood. I grew up on White Avenue. And I grew up on White Avenue because Robert White was one of the founders of the neighborhood. And when Vanderbilt, when they moved into Shiloh, actually that was a mutually agreed upon, it was a mutually agreed upon thing. The people actually made more money by moving, they got more land. And my great-great-grandfather had this huge swath of land with all of his relatives living on it, and they put a street through it, and they called it White Avenue. But the students at UNCA have done a lot of work for us in terms of keeping the history of the neighborhood alive. Yes, ma'am.
Could you talk a little bit more about this tour? I'm interested, but it just kind of went by very quickly. When and where and how?
I'm going to let Sophie or Shaniqua.
Did you get one of the copies of the sheet? The information is on there, so the contact information, and you can go schedule a group or just yourself and call that and make an arrangement, and then they will schedule you to come out, and they will provide the tour, the transportation and everything, but you come to the community garden.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes. I don't want to open a can of worms, and you may just want to park this somewhere else, but one of the things that I've been concerned about over the years is the rising property taxes in legacy neighborhoods. And to me, that is an accelerator of gentrification. Have you all got thoughts about, I know I've talked to some of our elected representatives about coming up with ways to address that. Have you all got any thoughts about that?
We have contacts, and actually we have, I don't know if Bobette May, she's probably not here today, but she actually works with Buncombe County and has come out and set up, Shaniqua, you attended a couple of those. Can you share with them one of those and how that works, please?
So she's brought the city out to do reappraisal workshops. There were Q&A sessions. I'm hoping to have another one in August, because people will get their letters in the mail about 2025 reappraisals coming up. But she did have 2 workshops with the city in Shiloh.
And we'll probably plan more, and so that we can understand just what's happening. Now, what the other part is, of course, is that that's what we'll be looking at, how to help with some of those increasing costs of the taxes. That's going to be a real huge deal, and so we need to know that.
There are communities, I know I lived in one, where once you reach a certain age, it's not even means tested, but once you reach a certain age, there's a portion of your property taxes that is forgiven. And yes. I just wonder if legislatively we could collectively try to get some conversations about that started.
And that's still in place, but you do have to apply for it. It doesn't come just because you turn a certain age. I mean, you actually have to apply for that. And Buncombe County has it, and there's also one from the state of North Carolina. But we are trying to, that's what we're trying to do, get the information out there about what's already available while we try to get more. Any more questions?
Yeah, anybody else have a question?
Well, I just like to say thank you to all the shallow faces, your smiling faces today. So please plan. You got everybody who did get one. We meet the first Monday in every month. The Shallow Community Association does. And please plan. You can come. You don't have to be in Shallow, but to find out what's going on in Shallow, we meet at the Linwood Crump Center at 6:30, first Monday in every month, unless it's a holiday and it's the second Monday. But please plan to come.
And on July the 11th, we'll have our Community Fund Day, Shallow Community Fund Day. And you'll hear about that again.
Well, thank you. If everybody can please give Mrs. Dixon, Mrs. White a round of applause. Thank you for coming. I guess you can carry back your microphone with you. If you want to sit down, you can stay here. However, we're about near the end of our Lunch and Learn. Again, thank you all for coming out. A couple of things before we do finish. One, again, as you hear these stories and hear the legacy and history of Asheville, is keeping in mind what goes into place, and then the story that you hear, what are we being led to remember and how to remember? And so what is, as I tell my students when I teach history at Mars Hill, every side has a spin. So you have to make sure you try to find out the whole story and not just the segment that seems popular. I pulled this out, especially Tuesday. Sasha Mitchell was talking about first families and legacies and names. And one name that she had brought up was the Gudger family. And we started talking, she was discussing that, really made me think about an article I had in my archives. Again, as a historian, you always find things squirreled away. And I'm just gonna read a real quick thing because, again, think about what we know and what we don't know and what is the whole story. Asheville's Confederate monuments in Pack Square, which is near the location of Asheville's old Buncombe City Courthouse, which was the slave market for the area, were designed and dedicated in 1926 by Catherine Yancey Hawkins Gudger, chair of the Dixie Highway Committee for the United Daughters of Confederacy in North Carolina. Her ancestors and the ancestors of her husband, U.S. Representative James Madison Gudger Jr., were among the largest slave holders in Buncombe County prior to the Civil War. Catherine Gudger said about the memorials that they would speak a silent message through all the coming years and will help keep alive Southern traditions and perpetuate the true history of the Southland. Now, there was another Gudger with a different message. Sarah Gudger was a former slave whose father had adopted the surname of the family that enslaved him, which was often a popular way that a lot of African Americans have their last name. McCoy, we had Irish owners there in the eastern part of North Carolina, so I always tell people, yeah, I'm Black Irish, but McCoy. But Sarah Gudger said those good times that Catherine Gudger wanted to remember, for Sarah says, I never know what it was to rest. I worked all the time from morning until late at night. I was always hungry. I didn't get much to eat. And I never slept on a bed until after freedom. It was just an old pile of rags in the corner. She remembered the ending of the Civil War because she was nearly 50 years old at that time. So I say that in what is the story, what are the names, but what is the backstory? It's things that we think are popular, things that, oh, this is the truth. But what is the truth? And are we willing to invest to find out the full and true story and not just a popular message? So again, as we think about gentrification, we think about these communities, and we think, oh, well, hey, it's going to be good. And yes, we need to do something about the traffic and Bowen Bridge and things like that, but we need to do it in a responsible manner, in a respectful manner. And even as we do it, and as we name places, what is the background to the name that we want to go? I think as they were talking about the Anderson Rosenwald School, again, being at Mars Hill, Anderson Rosenwald School up there is a big deal. It's a historic site. We talked about Viola King Burnett, who wrote a letter in the mid-40s to get busing for African American students there in Madison County so they could go to Stevens Lee, because Anderson Rosenwald School stopped at 7th grade. And she wrote a letter, just as they did in Shiloh, said, it's supposed to be education for all, and this is not right. And eventually, they started to allow busing to Stevens Lee. But again, what is the full story? What is the respect of the community? And how can the community work together to make sure that we're all respected and all honored? That's our messaging that we're trying to really emphasize this week as we celebrate Juneteenth. So enough from me. I'd like to ask Dr. Simmons to come up and give any last announcements, especially given last night. And as I move well, one thing I also keep in mind, some of you were with us yesterday as we had, again, like today, more people that came today than others. Say, hey, why'd y'all having a small place? Well, last time, everybody fit. This time we're overflowing. So we were talking out in the hall, said we will have to find some different spots. But yesterday, we as I told you, we had to make an emergency run. I had to make an emergency run up there to say, we need more food. And I didn't give a shout out to the Ingles right here on Haywood Road. I arrived there at 11:15 and said, we're going to have some folks that need some food at 1 o'clock. Can you? And they provide the extra sandwich. The guy said, we can do it. And so I just wanted to thank them. There's nobody here from, but I just wanted to put in mind that, that man stepped up. And he said, okay, and was able to provide. So I just wanted to think that was special for them to do that. And so happy that we keep being overcrowded and that we have to look at a different location. But here's Dr. Simmons.
I want to say something about being overcrowded too. One of the reasons why we do the Lunch and Learns is to take these programs to the community. And if the room is filled, that is beautiful, and we hope that we can always go to the various communities and tell the stories of those communities. And next year we will be choosing other communities to learn their history. And again, you're not going to always find this in your history books. And as we just heard from Ms. White when she talked about the teachers of yesterday that taught us this history, but no one is teaching that history to our children today. So we try to take it to our communities. It's very important that we listen to these people while we can and while they're still with us, so we can continue to pass those stories down. Please take a look at our co-sponsors: the City of Asheville, AB Tech Community College, Mission Health, Givens Community, Asheville Downtown Association, Advent Health, Dogwood Health Trust, Explorer Asheville, Burial's Beer, and New Belgian Brewing. I want to thank our Vice President, Jonathan McCoy, very much for being the leader in organizing these events. Let's give him a big hand.
Thank you. You all have a great afternoon. Also remember, if you have interest in election or voting, we have the League of Women Voters right back here, and they can answer any questions you might have about voting and even help you get registered if you haven't registered to vote. So they are at all our Lunch and Learns, but they're right back here in the back. Thank you all. Have a good afternoon.